right. I think we're live. Welcome, everybody. Let's go. That's right. Paul, I see you over there. Roy, Jimmy, welcome. I see Jeffrey, Mark, John, and who else do I see in the crowd here? Vanessa and Ruby, Wasim Photos, welcome as well. All right, we are live and about to kick things off today. Sorry for the slight delay in getting started here. I just realized I hadn't set up one of the streams, and now we're good to go. So today we're going to take a look at removing distracting elements. We're going to look at multiple ways to do it. See some new examples, ones that I literally just came up with today. Hopefully they work. And we're going to see reasons why you should care about this in the first place, especially as a photographer or a designer. Because if you're putting work up for people to look at, you really want people to concentrate on the work and not be distracted by elements in the photo that distract from the main subject. So I see people from all over the world. I see people from Poland, from the Netherlands, from Albuquerque. So thanks for being here, and let's go ahead and dive in and get started. Let's learn some new stuff. All right, so I'm going to switch over to my computer. I've got Lightroom Classic open now, and it doesn't matter whether you're using Lightroom Classic or just Lightroom, the new cloud-based one. The Lightroom techniques will be the same. Then we're going to talk about some Photoshop techniques. So let's just start with the simplest form of removing the distraction. I've got several examples here, and let's go to this first one. So if we look at this first photo, taken in my studio, she's like dancing or fixing her leg or doing something. But anyway, she's obviously the subject. And then at the very bottom of the photo, there's this, oh, you can't even see it. Hold on. Let me go back out. You can't see it full screen. Let me go to Loop View. At the very bottom of the photo, there's this just little piece of the softbox that got caught by, in the shot. Now, this is one of the easiest ones to get rid of as a distraction because you just crop the photo. You don't really need that much floor space. Cropping this photo is not going to take away from it anyway. It's going to make the subject seem bigger in the photo. So cropping is definitely a way to remove a distraction. So this is going to be our easiest first one to do. We'll head over to the Develop module, or in regular Lightroom, you would use the Crop tool. We're going to use the Crop tool here as well. And you'll note that by default, your crop is usually locked to the original aspect ratio. That means if you crop up, it's also going to crop from the side because it's trying to keep the aspect ratio the same. Well, you can unlock that. You can unlock that at any time, and you can crop any direction you want to kind of maybe make your subject, recompose your subject and put your subject wherever you want your subject to be. So if I wanted my subject on the left side of the photo, I could crop this way and crop up, and that becomes my new photo without the distraction. So again, simple, easy, non-destructive, piece of cake way to remove a distraction. If it's close to the edge, you can crop that distraction out. Now, what if it's not close to the edge? Or let's say it is close to the edge, but cropping it would take something away from the photo. So let's go to my next example. In my next example, there's a piece of an overhead softbox that's got into the photo. And if I were to crop this, which if I use the same technique we used before, then I'm going to end up cropping into her hand and into her body. So we don't want to do, or into her head. We don't want to do it that way. So in this case, we actually need to remove the distraction. A simple crop won't be enough. So you could try to do this in Lightroom. And if you were going to do this in Lightroom, you would use the spot removal tool, and you could paint and try and get all of this area selected. And once you do all of this area and get this all painted in, then when you let go, I haven't let go yet, it's going to randomly pick a spot to pick up from. So I'm going to let go in 1, 2, 3. I let go. So it picked up from her hair. We wouldn't want that. So you can move this spot. If you've got another place for it to pick up from, you can move it and try and get it to pick up from the spot you need. But you'd have to have a big enough spot to be able to do that from you. You'd have to have enough background left in order to pull it in. And I did a fairly okay job. Now, I could do it in smaller pieces. I could paint a little bit, grab a piece, paint a little bit, grab a piece until maybe split it into 2 or 3 jobs and get it that way. But that would only be if I was just really trying to do this in Lightroom. Photoshop, much, much better for that type of operation. If it's something small and little, piece of cake in Lightroom. But if something complex or big and you don't have enough background space to do it, then that's where Photoshop comes in. So let me undo that. Let me undo it again. And now let's take it over to Photoshop. And the way we take it over to Photoshop, I usually hit Command E on the keyboard, Control E in Windows. I'm just going to right click and show it to you here. Right click on the photo, edit in Photoshop, and it will take a copy of the photo. So I don't have to worry about making a layer because I'm going to, not be retouching on the original. It'll make a copy and open that copy up in Photoshop. And let's see if it's already done that in the background. Okay, still working on it. And there it is. Okay, so now that I got this area in the photo same thing, I can do it a couple of ways. I can use the patch tool and make a selection around this. And with the patch tool, I'm just going to get a better result right off the bat. So just using the patch tool, done. That's it. The patch tool is amazing. So the patch tool on your tool panel, just grab it, make your selection, and then whatever it is you want to take it to a clean area, and it will patch the area you just selected with the clean area. So that did a much better job than using the spot removal tool in Lightroom. All right, so now I can just save it, close it, and when I head back to Lightroom, it'll put it right next to the original in the same collection. So this is what I meant by I don't spend a lot of time making just a duplicate layer in Photoshop, especially when I'm coming from Lightroom, because I've already got a duplicate in Lightroom. All right, so there's my original, there's my new one, and now let's move on to the next one. All right, someone's saying hello over there. That's Dab Studio. Welcome, Dab Studio, over on Twitter. All right, so now this next one. Distractions aren't always an object. Sometimes a distraction is just something else wrong with the photo that makes the user question what's wrong with it. So there's a couple things wrong with this photo. Number one, there is a distraction. There is an element coming in from the top. So even if I were to go to the crop tool in Lightroom and I were to pull down and crop away and maybe even straighten the photo out, because part of it could be the fact that the photo's tilted could be a distraction. Okay, that gets rid of one distraction, but that's not the only distraction. The color in this photo is off. The photo's a little dark. So all of those things are distractions. So what I mean by the color, if we go to the basic panel, and you can also do this in Camera Raw and Photoshop, we grab the white balance eyedropper. We look for something that should be around 18% gray. If you don't have anything around 18% gray, try and find something between something that's black or should be black or should be white. In this case, the microphone should be gray. When I click on it, the color in her skin, the rosy color, comes back. So the color was off. That's a distraction. The exposure is off. Let's make this a little bit brighter. That was a distraction. Now I can concentrate on other distractions now that I got this in place. The yellow stripe or piece of tape around the microphone is a distraction. So if I were to want to get rid of that, again, I could take it over to Photoshop and do it in 2 clicks. But I could also just use the spot removal tool in this case. And I'm going to grab my stylus here. And I'm just going to go and paint around the yellow here. Let's get it all. All right. And now that I got that, it's going to jump. It's going to pick a spot. The spot's wrong. I'm going to now just pick it up and move it to line it up with the microphone. Oh, a little bit more that way, and get a better patch. Or not a better patch, a better spot removal. All right, so once I get off the spot removal tool, it's a little bit shifted over to the left, but I'd move it, and there we go. So you can remove distractions in Lightroom, classic or regular Lightroom on the cloud, and the same tools work the same way. So Paul's asking, what's the difference between Lightroom Classic and Lightroom, which used to be called Lightroom CC? We just call it Lightroom now. Classic is the traditional version of Lightroom with all the modules, all the tools, all the ways of working with a photo, slideshow, book, map, print, web, that traditional photographers have used for over a decade. Lightroom, the new one, is cloud-based. So in Classic, you're managing your photos, you're backing them up, they're on your hard drives. The new one, Paul, all your images, the minute you import them, are being uploaded to the cloud. So you're buying cloud storage for that, and that's the major difference. Classic has more features, the regular Lightroom is new, so two products depending on what your needs are. All right, so let's go in and let's take a look at the next one. So next one, I'll do one more Lightroom adjustment. Same thing, what's taken away from this photo is this particular item that's sticking out of the ground, and it's probably some conservation marker. It's there for a reason, it's supposed to be there. And this is what people also get caught up in. Well, that was there, it's supposed to be there, it's part of the conservation, it's part of, the park where this is. True. And unless you're doing an editorial piece where you're talking about this particular object, and this has to be a non-manipulated photo, no one else cares. So unless it's that situation where it has to be exactly what was there, everyone's just going to look and try and guess what that is. And if they're guessing what that is, they're not paying attention to what the photo is all about. So that's what a distraction is. So once again, we'll head over to the Develop module, click on Develop, click on the Spot Removal tool. And instead of trying to do this all in one piece, sometimes it's better to do it in multiple pieces. So I'm going to take the top part of this. There we go. Let go, let it pick a spot. Actually, I like the spot it picked this time. And then I'm going to take the bottom piece of this. And I'm going to go, oh, I actually kind of like where it picked this one. So I'm actually okay with what it did. So there we are. So again, if it's something simple, you could probably get away with it in Lightroom. If it's something more complex, that's when it's time to go to Photoshop. All right, so let's get out of this one. And again, when you do it in Lightroom, those are non-destructive adjustments. So if I go back someday and they say, hey, we need that thing back that you removed, I could always hit reset and put it back because it's never really gone when you make an adjustment or a crop inside of Lightroom. All right, so, and I just undid that reset to put it back or take it away again. Now, license plates or other signs or other things that have personal information or things you don't want. Mike's asking a question, would I do all the edits before going to Photoshop? Absolutely. That's typically my workflow, is I do as much as I can in Lightroom, and I only go to Photoshop when I have to. So I would do all the other adjustments first. If I were really making this my photo, I would adjust the exposure, adjust the shadows, straighten it. I do all of that first. Then I deal with the license plate in Photoshop. But we're not retouching the entire photo, we're just dealing with the distractions. So in this case, this is not going to end well if I try and do this with the spot removal tool. It's just not going to be good enough for this. So we're going to go to Photoshop on this one. We're going to hit right click or Command E, edit in Photoshop. And this is a raw file. So once again, the original will still be in Lightroom when I'm done. And we're making a copy over in Photoshop. So take a few seconds to render that raw file out and open it up. And here we are. Now we're in Photoshop. Now, what I tend to see people do, and it drives me crazy, and I've been guilty of it myself. So, oh no, I can't have my license plate number displayed. Not my license plate, by the way. Can't have my license plate displayed. I know what I'll do. I'll select it, and then I'll make it so no one can read it. I'll just go to my filter menu. I'll come down to blur. I'll choose Gaussian blur. And there we go. I can choose the amount of blur. No, not enough, not enough. Oh, by the way, a lot of people do this. They just want to make it bad enough so you know there was something there, but you can't see what it was. And all you've done is trade one distraction for another. Because now you got people trying to figure out, it looks like that could have been a 2. Maybe that's a 1. So forth and so on. So you have people still trying to figure out the license plate as opposed to looking at the car that you shot or looking at the thing that you're trying to hide it from. So don't blur it. And worse, this is the worst one I see, where people do this. Instead of trying to blur, which blurring can be okay, Instead, they'll grab a paintbrush, they'll grab black paint, and they'll just do this. I'll spray paint it out. There we go. Now no one will be able to read that number. Great. And if you're just trying to do a social media post and it's not about your photography and whatever, then okay, fine. It's still distracting, but let's do it a better way. Let's not trade one distraction for another. Now, obviously, we're looking at the back of the car. Obviously, there would be a license plate there, but we don't necessarily have to have a license plate, do we? If it's about the car, if the car is the subject, then no one cares about the license plate. No one cares that it's a European license plate. No one cares that it's from whatever country that's from. No one cares. So let's undo that. And let's do it a different way. I came up with this technique just literally today. So let's grab the quick select tool and let's select not just the license plate, not just the number, but let's select the entire area. This entire area, that's made for the license plate. And it's kind of like an indentation into the whole car trunk area for this plate. So I just basically selected the entire area, not just the plate. Now we're going to put that on its own layer. So I'm going to hit Command J. The command for command, or the operation for Command J, is duplicate layer, or make a new layer, make a new layer via copy. Command J, that's what it's for, or Control J on Windows. So all that did was put the license plate up on its own layer. Now that I got the license plate on its, well, that whole section on its own layer, I'm going to fill it with a color of the car. Now to do that, I don't want to fill the whole layer. I don't want to fill the entire screen with this color. So there's a trick inside of the layers panel over here on the right hand side. All of these are various locks. So we can lock everything and not make the layer editable at all. Now the layer has a lock on it. Or more importantly, we can just lock the transparency. When you just lock the transparency, you're saying everything that already has pixels is fair game. Everything that's clear cannot be touched. So we're just locking the transparency instead. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to go in and let's see. So Paul looks like he's streaming on my channel right now on Facebook, which is even weirder. All right, but anyway, we're going to continue on. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go in and fill this with a color. So I'm going to grab my eyedropper tool and I'm going to click the color of the car. So just grabbing the eyedropper, hitting the letter I, and clicking on the color of the car. And hang on, let me let people know. Hang on just for a second. Let me just type in this response. One second, guys. All right, anyway. All right, so now that we've locked this, the next thing, and we selected used the eyedropper and we selected the color of the car with the eyedropper. Next thing and we locked the transparency, we're just gonna go ahead and fill that layer. So I'm just gonna go fill with foreground color, 100%, click OK, and it'll just fill it. Now, that is okay, but it doesn't have the same look as it would have had if the license plate was just not there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go up and we're going to use a layer effect to make it so it looks like the same indentation that we had a minute ago. So we'll use our effects panel and we're going to come down, we're going to choose inner shadow. So inner shadow will give us that exact same look like we had before, as if the license plate was just never put on the car. And of course, you can even rotate the shadow around. You can control what angle the shadow comes in from. I like it to come in actually from the top like it was before, or maybe, oops. sure what I did there. There we go. And maybe just slightly at an angle. So now we click OK. And that becomes our new license plate. So it's still on its own layer. We can always turn that back off, get to the original license plate. But that just gives it that look of, oh, it's a brand new car with no license plate on it, as opposed to not being a distraction by having the original license plate. All right, so we'll save that. That will save out a brand new PSD layered file. And once that's done, it will return it back to Photoshop, or back to Lightroom, I should say, and put it right next to the original. Okay, the next one, and again, this one has a few little distractions here and there, but what I don't like necessarily is, first of all, there's a little distraction popping out of her head. That's one that needs to go. And then just things like fingerprints, dust, things like that kind of something on the wall. Alrighty. And we're just using the patch tool, dragging the fingerprints to a clean area of the back of the laptop to try and take care of just the visible fingerprints. Now you can zoom in, do a better job, you get the idea, but just getting rid of the big ones, the big distractions here. And if one just won't seem to go away, switch your mode from normal to Content Aware, and that should do it. This Content Aware will do a more accurate patch, a more exact patch, I should say, without trying to blend in the edges. And since this is all the same color on the back, it makes it easy. You can also clone stamp them out, but just removing those little things, those little distractions, especially the things that may be popping in and out of someone's head. All right. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to close this one. Again, that will save a copy. That'll put it right next to the original in Lightroom. And now we'll go to this one. So in this particular shot, this was out on location, out in the Red Rock Canyon. And I set up a light, obviously, to light my subject. And I love the light that I got from this light on the subject. But the light itself is the distraction now. It's like it had to be there because I needed to light the subject. But it just can't... could not hear another. Okay, I'm not sure what that means, Rose. But it's just not... You know, it's part of the photo now. I need to get rid of it. So it's another distraction. So let's go ahead and edit this one. Same thing. We'll hit Command E, Control E to edit in Photoshop. And that will pop it over in Photoshop. And this time we're going to use something called ContentAware Fill. So I'm going to make a selection. Even though I'm using a patch tool, it could be the lasso. It could be any way you want to select this. So I'm just going to make a quick selection around it. And now that I got my selection halfway done, oops, kind of missed a spot there. I'll go back and get that. Making a nice liberal selection around it. Not too close, not too far away. Because ContentAware Fill needs some room to work. And I'll add to the selection this little piece that I missed. And I grabbed a little too much. Let's subtract, holding down the Option key or Alt key. Okay, so now that I got that selected, what do I mean by ContentAware Fill? Well, remember when we filled the license plate, we went up to Edit, Fill, use the foreground color? Well, ContentAware Fill is the same, it's under the same function, under Fill, but instead of foreground color, use ContentAware. And what that tells it to do is to look around this selection and fill it in from the outside. So we'll just click OK. Wait a few seconds, and if the magic works, it will just fill that in for me using the surrounding pixels of the mountains, of the rocks. Now, there's a little bit of touch-up I do right here. I'd probably clone up from there or from the side to fill that little spot in and maybe this little spot here. But that's it. It did the bulk of the work for me and looks pretty clean. So content-aware fill, when you want to remove something complicated, and you don't want to sit there patching it multiple times, that could do it as well. All right, let's go in and let's take a look at one more. Now, this is a skyline shot from the city of Detroit. I was down the street further down and shot this right around sunrise, I believe. And there's a few distractions here. So the first distraction, I'll hit the crop tool. Actually, let me reset this. This is the way it really looked. So the first distraction was the image is slightly crooked. So I'm going to grab the angle tool, and I'm just going to drag along one of the tower's edge that should be straight. And now straighten it out for me. The next thing, I'll go to the basic panel, and I can hit auto, see what that does. Yeah, that lightens it up quite a bit. So the other distraction was the fact that it was too dark. Now, I can concentrate on the other visible distractions. That light post on the left-hand side, kind of a distraction. I could crop off the left side, but then I'd be cropping off quite a bit. And this little building, whatever this is, this little generator, whatever this building is on the right-hand side, that's a distraction. So that's a little bit too much work for Lightroom. So let's go in and, wow. Hang on for a second here. I was just looking at that other stream that got stepped on. All right, hang on one second, guys. Let's see if I can bring this back. If not, I won't worry about it. Okay, we're not going to worry about it. All right, so let's, a little bit too much for Lightroom. Let's go ahead and edit it in. Yep, okay. Let's edit this in Photoshop. And there it is in Photoshop now. And let's go ahead and take care of a couple of things here. So first thing I'm going to do, and again, sometimes it's easier to work in pieces than to try and do it all at once. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and just make a selection using the lasso or the patch tool, it doesn't matter which, around the pole itself. Not going to worry about this part of it, just around the pole. Okay, and then if I try and, okay, so I've tried this a couple different ways. If I try and patch it like that, well, the stuff around it doesn't really match up very well. And if I let go, it might be okay, it might not. Let's see what we get. Okay, I could live with that, but let's undo it. Let's do a better job. Instead, well, let's use ContentAware Fill instead. So we'll go up to our edit menu once again. We'll choose Fill, Content Aware instead of foreground color, and click OK. And that does a much better, cleaner job of filling that in. Now, there's the little part at the top. This looks like a light that's hanging here all by itself. And we can select as much of that light as we can see. And then we can use the patch tool on that, and that should be okay. Or we could use ContentAware Fill on that as well. So let's see what that looks like. And not bad. It looks natural. Looks like the leaves would actually be there. Now let's take care of the building itself. So same thing, this little pole coming up out of the top of the building. The building hiding here amongst the rocks and the foliage. A little secret bunker. Okay, so now I got that selected. Now, one of the keyboard shortcuts for ContentAware Fill is delete, but it's a layer. So if you hit delete, it actually deletes it. So let's undo that. If you're on a layer and not just the background, the way the keyboard shortcut for ContentAware Fill is Shift Delete. So let's do Shift Delete. That'll do ContentAware Fill, and that will invoke the ContentAware Fill to fill in that area. So Paul says, how do you put a logo in 10 photos at the same time? You could use an action to do that, Paul. You could, there's no other easier way, I mean, other than opening the photos up and putting them in, or write an action that puts them in for you as a watermark. You can use Lightroom, put them in Lightroom Classic to put them in as a watermark as well. All right, so with that said, let's save that one. That will make a copy. We'll still have our original untouched layer or image to go back to. All right, close it, switch back to Lightroom, and there it is, right next to the one that had the pole in it and the one that doesn't. All right, so I'm not going to take the time because we're out of time to go through this entire one, but now that you've seen some of these techniques, I'm going to show you a distraction that, again, just people don't even think to look at. So for example, if I look at this photo of this electric car charging, the distractions are all this crap on the ground. You know, like you got some concrete or something, that's dust, whatever this is, all the little pieces of paper, there's garbage over here on the ground. All of that takes away from the car itself, because everyone's like, oh, what's that on the ground? What's that little piece of paper? What's that over there? So taking my time, going through it little by little, using the patch tool, using ContentAware Fill, I ended up with this. Just cleaning up the ground, making the image have a better place to sit, as opposed to all of the garbage we saw in the original shot. So this is the original. This is the one that I just cleaned up the ground. So getting rid of those distractions to make your images stand out, to make the subject stand out, to not distract people from looking at what you intended them to look at. So in other words, if you wanted them to look at the car and they're too busy looking at all the little pieces of paper on the ground, then you're probably doing your photography a disservice when you do that. And you're doing your graphic design a disservice if you're placing this image in your design, because people are not so much concerned about the message you're trying to convey, they're concerned about all the little things. So Bucky's asking, where can you get, I guess you mean free, wedding backgrounds? I don't know who has backgrounds, so I don't know. They may exist, I just don't know who has them. All right, so with that said, we're